If you are a fan of Discworld, but you really just want it to be connected with something a little more ancient and a little less medieval, then today's book just might be for you. Today, I will be covering Pyramids by Terry Pratchett. Welcome to Spencer Reads Everything. I'm your host, Spencer Duncan, and today we're taking a look at one of the Discworld books that by and large stands by itself. It is part of a smaller collection of books that you can just call Ancient Civilizations, or it is clearly meant as a commentary and a joke of ancient Egyptian civilizations. Now, it is not entirely meant to just poke fun at ancient Egyptian civilizations, more of poking fun at our common perceptions of what was once a very powerful and very influential civilization. However, when we think about it, we have a tendency to create caricatures of it. And so that is something that Terry Pratchett is trying to do in this novel. Just to give you a quick summary, in this novel, the main character is Teppic, which is short for Teppic, and as a joke, all of the main characters' names tend to have a silent P in front of them, of course referring to the Ptolemy dynasty, which was the most important dynasty at the end of Egyptian civilization. He's the crown prince of Djelibeybi, which, as you can tell by the way I'm saying it, is pronounced Djelibeybi, but if you look at the spelling, again, it's just meant to look like something from antiquity with the way the consonants are put together. It's meant to be this small kingdom that's, again, clearly modeled after ancient Egypt, and it was once a vast empire in Clutch, which is one of the most important areas in the Discworld. In recent times, it had fallen into decline, and over the millennia, it had really just been burdened by debt and stagnation, and clearly was not growing. And this is largely due in part to the constant construction of pyramids for its pharaohs. Again, a reference to it being a caricature of Egyptian civilization. And this clearly is incredibly resource intense, especially since it takes up prime agricultural land. And so the kingdom is just this narrow strip along a 150-mile long river called Djel, and it is barely 2 miles wide. Again, clearly an obvious reference to ancient Egypt. Teppic, at the beginning of the novel, had actually spent the previous 7 years training at the Assassin's Guild in Ankh-Morpork, which is important for a few reasons. One, because it is still bringing Ankh-Morpork into this story, even though Djelibeybi is clearly not Ankh-Morpork, but there's always this effort to tie them together. Also, it is a reference back to the fact that there's an Assassin's Guild, which the absurdity of that is obvious if you stop and think about it. And he trains with them, and he's incredibly talented. And he also does it because he's hoping that in so doing, he can help generate just some really much needed revenue for his homeland. And so right after he passes his final exam, he gets this sense that his father is about to pass. And so he is going to return home and find that his father had passed. His father is named Teppic the 17th, I think. And it is, again, just a reference to all of the Egyptian pharaohs appearing to have the same name. And when he gets there, he's going to immediately come into conflict with the people that are running Djelibeybi, because it has this storied tradition and they have ways that they do things. And he actually had been raised outside of Djelibeybi, and so he is not completely familiar with why things are being done the way that they are. And so he is immediately going to resist almost everything that the main high priest, whose name is Dios, it's not a particularly creative play on words there, but as you can see, and Dios is really going to try and just enforce rigid customs, and he's trying to leave very little authority to the pharaohs, which is going to be a problem for Teppic. And so Dios is going to plan to bury his father again in a giant pyramid, even though Teppic knew that his father didn't really want to have yet another pyramid built. And so when they start to get an argument over it, and Dios is going to completely dismiss this, Teppic is then impulsively going to actually order that the pyramid be even bigger, double the size of any previous pyramid. And so the family that was known for building pyramids, the Taklups family, they're professional pyramid builders. They're really going to just struggle to complete this project within budget and on time. While the unfinished pyramids begin to distort time and space, meanwhile, the spirit of his father is going to be roaming the palace and just observing everything that goes on, including his own embalming and just the daily life of the embalmers Dill and Gurn, which are clearly meant to be comic relief, although to be fair, everyone is humorous to some extent or another. And then you have just this series of misadventures in which Teppic is going to end up fleeing the palace with a handmaiden named Trassi. And the reason why is because she had essentially been sentenced to death for also refusing to be killed to go serve the late pharaoh in the afterlife. So you can see how it was a lose-lose situation for her. And so Teppic is going to try and spare her, and Dios is going to use this as justification to catch them and to accuse Teppic of killing the king, insisting that he had been responsible because he actually wanted to have Trassi for himself. And so Dios declares that Teppic is actually no longer truly the king. And so during this turmoil, the gigantic pyramid is again going to start to just warp the reality, and it's going to shift Djelibeybi 90 degrees out of alignment with the rest of the disc. And so then Teppic and Trassi are going to manage to escape, and they're going to journey to Ephebe, and they're going to be seeking advice from the local philosophers on how to restore their kingdom. Meanwhile, just chaos is going to reign in Djelibeybi. And so the kingdom's many gods are all just going to be competing for the same roles. So the sun god, the supreme god, etc. And they're going to descend upon the people, and a lot of the long dead pharaohs are going to return to life. Without Djelibeybi serving as a buffer zone, Ephebe and Sort are going to prepare for war. That was one of the roles that Djelibeybi had served for centuries. And so in the end, Teppic is going to return to Djelibeybi with his resurrected ancestors, and he is going to destroy the Great Pyramid, which had caused all of this craziness. And then he's going to confront Dios, who is revealed to be as ancient as the kingdom itself, having advised every pharaoh in its history. And then Dios, just trying to cling to tradition, believes that the kingdom must never change. And Teppic is going to successfully destroy the pyramids, and he's going to actually restore Djelibeybi to the real world and send Dios back in time, where he meets the kingdom's founder, repeating the cycle of history, which is incredibly apt for Egyptian history because one of its defining features is just how consistent it was over time. And then Teppic is actually going to abdicate the throne, and he's going to allow Trassi, who is also his half-sister, again, a reference to ancient Egypt, to take over as ruler, and she quickly begins implementing much needed reforms. And so Teppic is then going to decide to explore the disc. Well, death comes to guide the former pharaohs to the afterlife, and the embalmers and the pyramid builders are just going to have to adjust to this new world that doesn't have any pyramids. Like I've said in the other videos when it comes to Discworld, much of what I enjoy about these are going to be the same from book to book. However, this one I enjoyed even more so, I think. I realized that the commentary and the references to not just pop culture, but everything in culture broadly speaking is fair game for Terry Pratchett's commentary. And what do I mean by that is that, you don't think of our perception of Egypt necessarily being part of pop culture, but it certainly is within our culture. When we think of Egypt, we think of the pyramids, we think of mummies. These are all things that are, for most people, are going to be so far removed from us, yet they still persist. We are all very familiar with those things, whether it's TV shows or movies or scary movies that play off of those. We certainly have a concept of ancient Egypt, broadly speaking, as a larger culture. And so I found that element very entertaining. And as a historian, I found it all the more engaging simply because he is taking a whole civilization and working with it instead of simply playing off individual tropes, although I enjoy those in his books as well. All of the other things that he has in his book, his play on words, the dialogue, the lightheartedness of the interactions, despite the fact that there is clearly going to be moments of extreme danger for the protagonist, there's still just the way they talk and the way they engage with each other. There's an element of not taking yourself too seriously, at least in the way he writes things. So who would I recommend this for? Just like all the other Discworld books, you first have to be a fan of fantasy, and you have to be a fan of satire. In this case, I wouldn't say you have to be a fan of ancient Egypt, but you have to be ready to understand that that is going to be the basis, and it's going to essentially all the humor and the commentary is going to revolve around that and our perceptions of Egypt. And I also think that it is a pretty good book for you to read if you're looking for one-offs in the Discworld series. This is not part of a larger sub-series, and since it's the 6th or 7th book in the series, it's a pretty well-known of the series, yet it is not going to tie you into too many other elements of the series if you're not interested in that. Or if you're like me and you're a completionist, it's also just a nice moment of reprieve. When all the other books leading up to this are part of larger sub-series, this one is on its own, and it's a very entertaining book on its own. And so I would recommend it for anyone that is interested in that humor and the fantasy element that also couples our perceptions of an ancient civilization and has a running commentary on what we should be thinking about our perceptions. Who wouldn't I recommend this for? Well, if you're not a fan of fantasy or a fan of ancient civilizations or a fan of just making fun of the larger culture, then this might not be for you, but it is a good standalone. So if you are interested in fantasy or the satirical elements of it, this is a book that I would recommend for almost anyone that's considering Discworld. But please let me know what you guys think. Put it in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on those notifications, and until next time, keep those pages turning.